The California sun beat down mercilessly on the Coronado Naval Amphibious Base as Lieutenant Mara Cross stood in formation with 139 other candidates. The Pacific Ocean roared in the distance, a constant reminder of the hell that awaited them. Sweat already trickled down her spine, though the real torture hadn't even begun. She was one of 3 women in this Bud S class. The other 2 stood several rows away, their faces set in the same mask of determination she wore. They'd all heard the statistics. Only 20 to 30% of candidates would make it through. For women, the numbers were even grimmer. But Mara hadn't come here to be a statistic. She'd come here to earn the trident, to become a Navy SEAL, to honor a promise made over a flag-draped coffin 17 years ago. "Listen up," Senior Chief Instructor Hartley's voice cut through the morning air like a blade. "You think you're special because you made it here. You're nothing. Half of you will quit before Hell Week even starts. The rest will ring that bell when the real pain begins." Mara kept her eyes forward, her breathing steady. She'd prepared for this mentally and physically for years. 4 years at the Naval Academy, where she'd outperformed most of her male peers in combat fitness tests. 2 years as a surface warfare officer, proving herself aboard a destroyer. Months of pre-training, pushing her body beyond limits she didn't know existed. But nothing truly prepared anyone for Bud S. "Uniform inspection," Hartley barked. "Strip to your PT gear, move, move, move." The candidates exploded into action, peeling off their fatigues with practiced speed. Mara pulled her shirt over her head, revealing the Navy-issue PT tank top underneath. That's when she felt it, the sudden weight of stares. Her tattoo. She'd almost forgotten about it in the chaos of in-processing. On her left shoulder blade, intricate and beautiful, was a design that had taken the artist 8 hours to complete. A Special Forces crest, the crossed arrows and dagger, intertwined with a pair of dog tags. Beneath them, in elegant script, April 14, 2009. The whole piece was done in black and gray, with hints of gold in the crest that caught the sunlight. "Well, well, well," the voice came from behind her, dripping with condescension. "What do we have here?" Mara didn't turn. She knew the voice belonged to Derek Paulson, a former USC linebacker who'd made it clear from day one that he believed women had no place in special operations. He'd been a football star, used to being the alpha, used to having people worship him. Bud S was supposed to be his new arena. "Nice ink, Princess," Paulson said louder, making sure others could hear. Several candidates nearby turned to look. "Let me guess, Daddy buy you that along with your slot here, or did you get it to look tough for Instagram?" Laughter rippled through the formation. Not everyone joined in, but enough did to make Mara's jaw clench. Her hands tightened into fists at her sides, nails digging into her palms. "Don't react, don't give them anything." "I bet it's got some inspirational quote," Paulson continued, warming to his audience. "Live, laugh, love, girl boss, what is it, Tat?" More laughter. The nickname stuck immediately. She could see it in their eyes. She was no longer Mara Cross, decorated officer, top 5 graduate of her Naval Academy class. She was Tat, the girl with the cute tattoo playing soldier. "Paulson," Instructor Hartley's voice cracked like a whip. "You volunteering for extra PT?" "No, Senior Chief." "Then shut your face and get in position." The moment passed, but the damage was done. Mara could feel the shift in energy around her. Some candidates looked embarrassed by Paulson's behavior. Others smirked, clearly enjoying the show. A few, including a quiet, lean guy with Texas written all over him, looked at her with something like sympathy. She didn't want sympathy. She didn't want anything except to prove she belonged here. The inspection continued. Instructors moved down the line, checking equipment, looking for any excuse to make someone's life miserable. When they reached Mara, one of them paused at her tattoo. "That regulation cross?" "Yes, Senior Chief. Approved before commissioning." He grunted and moved on. But she could feel Paulson's eyes on her back, could practically hear him filing away ammunition for later. "Everyone surf zone now." The command sent all 140 candidates sprinting toward the beach. Mara launched forward, her legs pumping, sand flying beneath her boots. The ocean loomed ahead, cold and violent. This was the first test, surf torture, where they'd lie in the freezing water until hypothermia crept in, until the bell hanging on the beach started to look like salvation. She hit the water third in the entire class, diving under a wave and coming up gasping at the cold. 55 degrees. Cold enough to kill if you stayed in too long, cold enough to break the weak. Around her, candidates struggled against the surf. Waves crashed over heads, pulled people under, tossed them like rag dolls. Mara found her rhythm, breathing between swells, keeping her core tight against the cold. A body splashed down next to her. Paulson. "Can't hide that tattoo now, can you?" he shouted over the roar of the ocean. "What's wrong, Tat? Can't handle a little joke? Maybe you should." A massive wave crashed over both of them, cutting off his words. Mara went under, the world turning to green chaos. Water filled her nose, pressure crushed her chest. For a moment, she felt panic claw at her throat. Then she thought of the tattoo, of what it meant, of who it represented. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "When things get hard, when you think you can't go on, remember why you started. Remember what matters." Mara kicked hard, breaking the surface with a gasp. She found her position in the surf line and set her jaw. Let them mock, let them laugh, they didn't know her story. Not yet. But they would. When the whistle blew 40 minutes later and they stumbled from the surf, 18 candidates had already quit. Mara walked past the bell without a glance. Paulson followed, but his earlier confidence had cracked. He'd seen something in her eyes when she surfaced from that wave, something that unnerved him. She wasn't just determined. She was unbreakable. And her story was just beginning. 3 weeks into first phase, and Mara had learned that Bud S wasn't just about physical endurance, it was psychological warfare. The instructors were masters at breaking candidates down, finding their weaknesses, exploiting every crack in their armor. But they were professionals, doing a job with purpose. Derek Paulson and his crew, they were just cruel. Log PT, Boat Crew 2, move your asses, Instructor Rodriguez bellowed across the grinder. Mara sprinted with her 6-man crew toward the massive telephone pole lying in the sand. 300 pounds of raw timber that would rest on their shoulders for the next hour, or 2 hours, or however long the instructors felt like torturing them. Positions. Mara took her spot at the front left, squatting beneath the log. Paulson was directly behind her, with Rodriguez, the quiet Texan who'd become her swim partner, at the rear. The other 3 were Jenkins, McCarthy, and Wung, all decent guys who'd stopped laughing at Paulson's jokes after the first week. UP. They heaved the log onto their shoulders. Immediately, Mara felt the weight crushing down. 300 pounds divided by 6 meant 50 pounds each, but it never worked that way. Someone always carried more, usually her, because she was 5'7" and the shortest person in the crew. Extended arm carry. Pure hell, they had to raise the log above their heads, arms locked straight. Mara's shoulders screamed within seconds. Her muscles trembled. Sweat poured down her face, stinging her eyes. Hold it, the instructor circled them like a shark. Boat Crew 2, you look weak. Cross, you shaking already. No, instructor, Mara gritted out, even though her arms felt like they were tearing from their sockets. That's when she felt it. The log shifted. Paulson had adjusted his position, subtly angling the weight forward, putting more pressure on her and Rodriguez at the front. Can't handle it, Tat, Paulson whispered, just loud enough for the crew to hear. That pretty tattoo won't carry the log for you. Maybe you should get one that says I quit. Mara's arms shook harder, but not from weakness, from rage. DOWN. The log slammed onto their shoulders, a moment of relief before the next torture began. Run to the surf zone, log stays up. They ran, the log bouncing on their shoulders with each step. Sand grabbed at their boots. The ocean beckoned ahead, promising cold water and wet misery. Paulson kept whispering, "You know what everyone's saying, that you only got here because of diversity quotas, that the Navy's so desperate to put women through that they'll pass anyone with XX chromosomes." "Shut up, Paulson," Rodriguez growled from the back. "What Rodriguez, you her boyfriend now, or you just hopping shield?" "I said shut UP. Boat Crew 2, stop talking, start moving. Give me 50 burpees now." They dropped the log and fell into burpees. Down, chest to sand, explosive jump. Repeat. 50 times. Mara's lungs burned, her vision blurred, but she kept pace with the men. She had to. Any sign of weakness would confirm everything Paulson said. The harassment followed her everywhere. In the chow hall, Paulson's table would erupt in laughter when she walked by. They'd make kissing sounds, call her Sailor Moon, suggest she was only here for the attention. Other candidates who might have defended her stayed silent. Nobody wanted to become a target. During dive training in the pool, Paulson accidentally kicked her tank loose during a buddy breathing drill. She had to surface fast, coughing and sputtering, while he smirked from below. "Equipment malfunction, instructor," he'd reported innocently. "She needs to check her gear better." The instructors hadn't bought it, but they couldn't prove anything. Paulson got away with it. In the barracks at night, when she tried to study dive tables and not configurations, she'd hear whispers from the next bay. "Instagram warrior. Daddy's girl. She'll quit during Hell Week. They always do." Only Rodriguez showed her any open kindness. He was from a small town in Texas, raised by a single mother and had 2 younger sisters. "My mama would beat me senseless if she knew I stood by while someone got treated like this," he told her one night. "You're doing good, Cross. Don't let them get in your head." But they were already in her head. The worst incident came during surf torture in week 4. The Pacific was angry that day, 10-foot swells crashing against the shore. The instructors had them form a line in chest-deep water, linking arms to avoid being swept away. Hypothermia was setting in fast, lips turning blue, violent shivering, the early stages of confusion. Mara locked arms with Rodriguez on one side and Jenkins on the other. The cold was so intense it felt like fire, like her bones were freezing solid. She focused on her breathing, on staying present, on not letting her mind drift into the dangerous fog of hypothermia. A wave crashed over them. When it receded, Paulson had repositioned himself right next to her. "You know what day it is, Tat?" he said through chattering teeth. She didn't answer. "It's April 14th. That's the date on your tattoo, right?" Mara's blood turned colder than the ocean. "Wonder what happened on April 14th, Paulson continued, his voice carrying over the waves. "Your sweet 16, the day you got that participation trophy you call a tattoo." Rodriguez tensed beside her. "Paulson, don't." "Or maybe," Paulson pushed harder, "it's the day Daddy bought his little girl an appointment to Annapolis. Is that it? The day you realized you could ride his coattails straight into a uniform you don't deserve." Something broke inside Mara, not her resolve, something deeper, a dam that had been holding back 17 years of grief, anger, and pain. Another wave crashed over them. When it cleared, Mara turned to Paulson. Her voice came out quiet but razor-sharp, cutting through the roar of the ocean. "You don't know anything about me." The intensity in her eyes made Paulson actually step back, breaking the line. For a second, just a second, he looked uncertain, maybe even afraid. "Paulson, get back in line," an instructor roared. The moment passed. They stayed in the surf another 20 minutes before the whistle blew. When they stumbled onto the beach, Mara's core temperature had dropped to dangerous levels. Medical pulled her aside, checked her vitals, wrapped her in warming blankets. Rodriguez sat down next to her, his own body shaking violently. "You okay?" he asked. Mara nodded, but she wasn't okay. Paulson had gotten too close. He touched on something he didn't understand, something sacred. That night after lights out, Rodriguez found her on the beach. She was sitting alone, staring at the ocean, her hand unconsciously touching her shoulder where the tattoo lived beneath her shirt. "You want to talk about it?" he asked quietly. Mara was silent for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "April 14th, 2009. I was 17 years old, 3 days away from my 18th birthday. I was picking out a prom dress when 2 officers showed up at our door." Rodriguez sat down beside her, saying nothing. "My father was Captain Michael Cross, Army Special Forces, 5th Group. He was leading a mission in Afghanistan, Nangarhar Province. His team was ambushed. He covered his men's retreat, held off the enemy until they could get to safety." Tears tracked down her face, mixing with the salt already there. "He died so his team could live. Every single one of them made it home. He didn't." "Jesus," Rodriguez breathed. "The tattoo isn't some cute design. Those are his actual dog tags. I had them melted down and mixed into the ink. That date is burned into my soul. And Paulson," her voice hardened, "Paulson just mocked the worst day of my life." Rodriguez put a hand on her shoulder. "He doesn't know. He's an idiot." "I know," Mara wiped her eyes. "But I'm done being silent. My father didn't raise a quitter. He raised a fighter." She stood up, squared her shoulders, and looked at the obstacle course looming in the darkness. Tomorrow would bring new torture, new tests, new opportunities for Paulson to tear her down. But something had shifted. The mockery had pushed her past breaking. Now she was forged steel. And Hell Week was coming. Hell Week began on a Sunday night with chaos. Instructors stormed the barracks at 2300 hours, screaming, throwing smoke grenades, firing machine guns loaded with blanks. Explosions rocked the building. Mara jolted awake to pure pandemonium, sirens wailing, instructors shouting contradictory orders, candidates scrambling in confusion. "Get outside, surf zone. Move, move, move." She grabbed her boots and sprinted into the night wearing only PT shorts and a tank top. The cold hit her like a physical blow. 45 degrees, wind howling off the ocean. Around her, candidates ran in every direction, some still half asleep, others wide-eyed with panic. This was it, the legendary Hell Week. 5.5 days of continuous training with maybe 4 hours of total sleep. Cold, wet, exhausted beyond comprehension, pushed to the absolute limits of human endurance. Only 70% of candidates made it to Hell Week. Only 30% would finish it. Mara intended to be one of them. Surf zone, get wet and sandy. They hit the water at a full sprint. The Pacific in January was a living nightmare, 55 degrees of liquid ice. Mara dove under a wave and came up gasping, her body going into shock from the cold. Every nerve ending screamed. "Everybody out, roll in the sand." Wet bodies hit the beach and rolled. Sand stuck to everything, hair, eyes, ears, mouths. It ground into skin like sandpaper. Mara felt it creeping into places sand should never go. Back in the surf. The cycle repeated. Wet, sandy, wet, sandy. Within an hour their skin was raw and bleeding. Within 2 hours hypothermia was setting in. Within 3 hours the first candidate quit. Then another. Then 5 more. The bell rang throughout the night, each chime announcing another broken dream. Mara's body went numb, not just from cold, from the sheer relentless brutality of it. Log PT on the beach, boat races in the surf, bear crawls through the sand, flutter kicks until their abs seized, push-ups until their arms collapsed. And through it all the instructors screamed, "You can quit any time. Ring the bell, get warm, get food, get sleep. Just 3 rings and this all ends." The temptation was almost unbearable. Hour 17, Monday afternoon. Boat Crew 2 was running down the beach with their IBS, inflatable boat, small, bouncing on their heads. 200 pounds of rubber that seemed to get heavier with each step. Mara's legs felt like rubber. Her vision tunneled. She'd been awake for nearly 40 hours. Boat Crew 2, rock portage. Terror spiked through her exhaustion. Rock portage meant paddling their boat through the surf zone and landing on the rocks, jagged, slippery, covered in barnacles. It was where people got seriously hurt. They dragged the boat into the water and started paddling. Waves immediately threw them sideways. Mara dug her paddle in, her shoulders screaming in protest. Next to her, Paulson looked like a corpse, gray skin, hollow eyes, movements mechanical. A wave lifted them, carried them forward, then slammed them toward the rocks. "Paddle, paddle," Rodriguez screamed from the back. Mara pulled harder, trying to steer them between the rocks. Almost there, almost. Another wave hit from the side. The boat flipped. Mara went underwater, tumbling in the chaos. Her head cracked against something hard, rock or boat, she couldn't tell. Pain exploded through her skull. Water filled her nose and mouth. She couldn't tell which way was up. Her lungs burned. Panic clawed at her throat. This is how it ends. Drowned during Hell Week, just like they predicted. Then her hand touched sand. She was near the bottom. She pushed off, kicked hard, and broke the surface, coughing and gasping. Blood poured from a gash on her forehead, mixing with seawater. She looked around wildly. The boat had washed onto the rocks. Her crew was scattered. Rodriguez pulling himself onto a rock, Jenkins floating nearby, Wung already on the beach. Paulson was standing on a rock above her, not offering to help. He was actually smirking. "Gonna quit now, Tat," he shouted over the crashing waves, his voice hoarse but cruel. "Look at you bleeding, drowning. You're pathetic. Just ring the bell, save yourself the embarrassment." Something in Mara snapped. She found a rock beneath her feet and stood up in the chest-deep water. Blood ran down her face. Her lips were split from the cold. Her body shook violently. She locked eyes with Paulson. "Never." The word came out as a roar, primal and fierce. She waded to the rocks, hauled herself up using arms that barely functioned, and grabbed her paddle from where it had washed up. "Get the boat," she commanded, "now." Her crew scrambled to obey, even Paulson, something in her voice brooking no argument. They manhandled the boat back into position and paddled back out for another attempt. This time, Mara steered them through perfectly. They landed the boat on the rocks with textbook precision. Boat crew 2, secure your boat and get to the medical tent. An instructor was pointing at Mara's bleeding head. I'm fine, instructor. That wasn't a request, Cross. Move. The medic stitched her forehead while she sat wrapped in a blanket, shivering. 7 stitches. Could have been worse. You got rocked pretty good, the medic said. Possible concussion. I should pull you from training for 24 hours. No, Mara's voice was steel. I'm fine, I'm going back. You could have brain damage. I said I'm fine. The medic studied her, then sighed. Against my better judgment, you're clear. But if you show any signs of serious concussion, confusion, vomiting, vision problems, you're done. Understood? Yes, Doc. She walked back to her crew with fresh stitches and a new determination. The injury had become another badge, another proof that she wouldn't quit. Hour 43, Tuesday night. They'd been running combat drills for 6 hours straight, crawling through the mud, carrying simulated casualties, navigating obstacle courses in total darkness. Half the class was gone now. 43 candidates had rung the bell. Mara was hallucinating. She saw her father standing on the beach, smiling at her. She saw dragons in the smoke from the pyrotechnics. She heard music that wasn't there. Cross, you okay? Rodriguez asked during a 2-minute rest break. I see things, she mumbled. We all do. It's normal. Stay with me. They were assigned to a new evolution. 4-man teams carrying telephone poles through the obstacle course. Mara's team included Rodriguez, Jenkins, and, unfortunately, Paulson. UP. They lifted the log. Mara's body screamed in protest. Everything hurt. Her hands were bleeding from rope burns. Her shoulders were raw from the log. Her feet were destroyed from endless running in wet boots. Move. They stumbled forward, trying to navigate the low wall while carrying the log. This required coordination, communication, teamwork. Paulson wasn't helping. He was barely holding his end, forcing the others to carry more weight. Paulson, lift, Rodriguez barked. I am lifting. No, you're not. We're drowning here. They made it over the wall somehow and started toward the next obstacle, but Mara's legs were giving out. Her knee buckled and she went down, the log falling. Get up, Cross, an instructor screamed. She tried, her body wouldn't respond. Suddenly, hands grabbed her, Rodriguez and Jenkins hauling her to her feet. Come on, we got you, Rodriguez said. Even Paulson, exhausted and broken himself, grabbed the log without complaint. They finished the obstacle course together, all 4 of them barely able to stand. That night, during a precious 20-minute rest period, Mara found herself alone on the beach. She sat in the sand, her hand finding her shoulder, touching the tattoo beneath her shirt. I'm still here, Dad, she whispered. I haven't quit, I won't quit. The wind carried her words away. Hour 78, Thursday morning. Mara couldn't remember what sleep felt like. She'd had maybe 2 hours total since Sunday. Her body was operating on pure willpower. They were doing around the world, boat races that circled the entire base. Paddle to the rocks, portage over, paddle to the pier, portage over, repeat. It seemed endless. Mara's paddle cut through the water mechanically. She was beyond pain now, beyond exhaustion. She was a machine programmed for one purpose: don't quit. Beside her in the boat, Paulson suddenly vomited over the side. He'd been getting worse, shaking uncontrollably, skin gray, eyes unfocused. Paulson, you okay? Jenkins asked. No answer. Paulson. The big man slumped forward, paddle falling from his hands. Instructor, man DOWN. The safety boat raced over. Medical pulled Paulson out, severe hypothermia, dehydration on the verge of organ failure. They rushed him to the medical tent. An hour later they heard it, 3 rings of the bell. Derek Paulson, the loudest critic, the cruelest bully, the man who'd made Mara's life hell, had quit. Mara felt nothing, not satisfaction, not relief, just a hollow acknowledgement that another candidate was gone. She kept paddling. Hour 132, Friday night. Hell Week was almost over. Just a few more hours until securing at noon on Saturday. 23 candidates remained from the original 140. Mara was beyond human at this point. She was a zombie, a walking corpse, held together by stubbornness and the memory of a man who'd never quit on his mission. The final evolution was simple: survival, stay awake, stay moving, don't ring the bell. She paced the beach, one foot in front of the other. Her mind drifted. She had conversations with people who weren't there. She saw colors that didn't exist. Rodriguez walked beside her, equally destroyed. "Almost there," he mumbled. "Almost there," she echoed. Dawn broke over the Pacific. Golden light spilled across the water. Class 447, fall in. They stumbled into formation. 23 hollow-eyed survivors, barely able to stand. Senior Chief Hartley walked the line, studying each face. "Congratulations," he said simply. "You've survived Hell Week, but you haven't earned your tridents yet. This was just the beginning." Myra swayed on her feet, but she didn't fall. She'd made it. Against all odds, against all mockery, against every voice that said she couldn't. She'd survived Hell Week. But as the class limped toward food and sleep, none of them knew that their biggest revelation was still to come. Commander James Sullivan was flying in from Virginia. And everything was about to change. Saturday morning after Hell Week, and the survivors looked like casualties of war. 23 candidates sat in the medical tent getting examined, checking for stress fractures, pneumonia, infected wounds, and the dozen other medical issues that came from nearly 6 days of continuous torture. Mara's feet were wrapped in bandages, covering blisters that had blisters. Her hands were taped to protect the raw, bleeding skin. The stitches in her forehead were holding, but the bruise had spread across half her face in spectacular purple and yellow. She looked like she'd gone 10 rounds with a heavyweight boxer. She felt like she'd won. "Cross, you need to be on antibiotics," the medic said, examining the infection starting in several of her wounds. "And I want you off your feet for 72 hours minimum." "When do we start second phase?" Mara asked, her voice hoarse from screaming through Hell Week. "Monday, but seriously, you need rest." "I'll rest when I'm dead." The medic shook his head but wrote her prescription. He'd learned that Hell Week survivors weren't normal humans. They didn't respond to logic or reason. They were forged into something harder. Rodriguez appeared beside her, equally bandaged and broken. "Heard Paulson's in the hospital, kidney damage from the hypothermia." Mara nodded. She'd heard the same. Part of her, the part that remembered his cruelty, felt vindicated, but mostly she just felt tired. "You know what's weird?" Rodriguez continued. "I almost feel bad for him. Hell Week breaks everyone down to who they really are. The tough guys quit. The quiet ones surprise you, makes you realize we're all just human." "Deep thoughts, Rodriguez." "Sleep deprivation makes me philosophical." He grinned, then winced as the expression pulled at his cracked lips. "Hey, rumor is we got a VIP coming to observe afternoon training. Some big shot from the East Coast." "Great, just what we need. Someone to watch us barely function." Sunday was a blur of sleep and pain. Mara woke up every few hours, disoriented, her body screaming. The medical team had them on a strict recovery protocol: hydration, nutrition, physical therapy. But Monday would bring new hell, second phase, which focused on combat diving. If first phase tested your body, second phase tested your mind. Underwater in the dark with faulty equipment while instructors tried to drown you. Pool competency, was legendary for breaking people who'd survived Hell Week. Mara spent Sunday studying dive physics and emergency procedures, trying to prepare mentally for what was coming. Monday morning formation. The class looked slightly more human after 36 hours of sleep and medical care. Still battered, still moving like old men, but alive. Senior Chief Hartley stood before them, his usual scowl somehow deeper. "Listen up, we have a distinguished visitor observing training today. Commander James Sullivan is here from DVGRU, SEAL Team 6 for you civilians who can't keep quiet. He's a living legend with 30 years of service, 3 silver stars and more classified missions than you have brain cells. When he arrives, you will stand at attention, you will show respect, and you will not embarrass me. Clear." HOIA, Senior Chief. Mara felt her stomach tighten. DVGRU, the elite of the elite. Why would someone at that level be observing a basic Bud S class? The morning was brutal. Pool work started immediately, treading water with weights, underwater swims, drown-proofing with hands and feet tied. Everything designed to induce panic, to test whether you could think clearly when your brain was screaming for air. Mara struggled. Her body hadn't recovered from Hell Week. Her lungs burned, her muscles refused to cooperate. During a 50-meter underwater swim, she barely made it, surfacing gasping and dizzy. "Cross, you suck at this," an instructor bellowed. "Maybe you should focus less on your tattoos and more on your breath control." The mention of her tattoo sent a ripple through the candidates. Several glanced her way. The mockery had died down significantly. Paulson's departure had killed most of it, but the memory lingered. At 1100 hours, a whistle blew. "Class out of the pool, formation on the grinder, move." They scrambled out, dripping and shivering. The grinder, the main training area, was where inspections happened, where candidates quit, where lives changed. Mara took her position in formation, standing at attention in her wet dive skin. Water dripped onto the concrete. Her body shook from cold and exhaustion. "Attention!" A figure appeared across the grinder. Commander James Sullivan wasn't physically imposing, maybe 5'10", lean rather than bulky. But the way he moved, the way he carried himself, radiated authority and competence. He was in his early 50s, gray threading through his close-cropped hair, crow's feet around eyes that had seen things most people couldn't imagine. He wore his khaki uniform with ribbons that told a story of decades of war. Silver stars, bronze stars with valor, purple hearts. The seal trident on his chest was worn smooth from years of wear. He walked down the line slowly, studying each candidate with an intensity that made them nervous. These were men and women who'd survived Hell Week, who'd proven their toughness. But under Sullivan's gaze, they felt like children. He paused at Rodriguez, studying his face, moved on. Stopped at Jenkins, nodded slightly, moved on. Reached Mara, and stopped. His eyes went first to her face, the black eye, the stitches, the evidence of Hell Week's brutality. Then they dropped to her shoulder. Her dive skin was tight against her body, the outline of her tattoo visible through the material. The angle of the sunlight made the design stand out clearly, the Special Forces crest, the dog tags, the date. Something changed in Commander Sullivan's expression. His eyes widened slightly. His jaw clenched. He leaned forward, studying the tattoo more carefully, as if confirming what he was seeing. The entire class felt the shift in energy. Instructors exchanged glances. Candidates held their breath. Sullivan's face went through a series of emotions: recognition, shock, grief, and something else. Something deeper. He straightened, his voice carrying across the silent grinder. "Lieutenant Cross." "Yes, sir." Mara's voice was steady, but her heart hammered. "Step forward." She stepped out of formation, standing at attention before the commander. Behind her, she could feel the eyes of her entire class. Rodriguez's confusion, Jenkins' concern, the instructor's curiosity. "That tattoo," Sullivan said quietly, his voice barely audible beyond the two of them. But in the silence, everyone strained to hear. The Special Forces crest, the dog tags, the date April 14, 2009. It wasn't a question, it was recognition. "Explain it to me, Lieutenant." Mara's throat tightened. This was her private pain, her sacred memorial. She didn't discuss it with anyone, but this was a direct order from a commander. She took a breath. "Captain Michael Cross, sir, 5th Special Forces Group, killed in action, Nangarhar Province, Afghanistan, April 14, 2009. The words fell like bombs across the grinder. Sullivan's eyes closed briefly, as if absorbing a physical blow. "Your father?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. "Yes, sir." The silence stretched. Mara could hear the ocean in the distance, the wind across the grinder, her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. Commander Sullivan opened his eyes. They were wet. Then he did something unprecedented in Bud-S history. He came to attention, perfectly rigid, shoulders back, chin up. His right hand came up in a crisp salute, held with absolute precision. Saluting a subordinate, something commanders never did. The instructors froze. The candidates stared in shock. "I served with Captain Michael Cross," Sullivan said, his voice thick with emotion but carrying clearly across the grinder. 5th Special Forces Group, Kandahar Province, 2007. He was one of the finest soldiers I ever knew, one of the finest men I ever knew. Tears pricked at Mara's eyes. She returned the salute, her hand trembling. "He saved my life," Sullivan continued. "I was hit during an ambush. Captain Cross carried me 3 clicks under fire, kept me alive, got me to the extraction point. I was a SEAL lieutenant at the time, attached to his unit for a joint operation. He didn't have to save me. SEALs aren't his responsibility. But he did anyway because that's who he was. Sullivan's voice cracked. I spoke at his memorial service. I watched them fold that flag. He paused, collecting himself. I didn't know he had a daughter in the military. He died 3 days before my 18th birthday, sir, Mara said quietly. Before I graduated high school, before I went to Annapolis, he never knew I'd follow him into service. Sullivan lowered his salute. Mara lowered hers. But he would have known, Sullivan said. He talked about you during that 3-click carry, kept himself conscious by telling me stories about his daughter, how smart you were, how determined, how you never quit at anything ever since you were a little girl trying to climb trees that were too tall for you. A sob tried to escape Mara's throat. She swallowed it down. He told me, Sullivan continued, that if you ever wanted to serve, you'd be unstoppable, because you had his stubbornness and your mother's brains. He said, and I quote, "My daughter doesn't know the meaning of quit. It's not in her DNA." The class was utterly silent. Some candidates had tears streaming down their faces. Sullivan stepped closer, his voice dropping so only Mara could hear. "Those dog tags in your tattoo, are they his?" "Yes, sir. I had them melted down and mixed into the ink." "Jesus," Sullivan's voice was reverent. "He wore those tags in the firefight that killed him. I saw them at his memorial." He stepped back, addressing the entire class now, his voice returning to command strength. "I want everyone here to understand something. Lieutenant Cross isn't here because of her father. She's not riding anyone's legacy. She's here because she earned it, just like every one of you earned it. She survived Hell Week. She's bleeding and broken and still standing. That's not because of a tattoo or a famous father. That's because she's a warrior." He turned back to Mara. "Your father would be incredibly proud, and so am I." Then Commander James Sullivan, legend hero, the man who'd seen and done things that remained classified, saluted her again. This time she couldn't stop the tears. The formation was dismissed, but the weight of what had just happened hung in the air like smoke. Candidates moved slowly, processing, whispering among themselves. Several approached Mara with new respect in their eyes, but she couldn't handle their attention right now. She needed air, space, time to process that her father's legacy had just collided with her present in the most unexpected way. Commander Sullivan caught her eye and gestured toward the beach. "Walk with me, Lieutenant." It wasn't a request. They walked in silence for a few minutes, leaving the base behind. The Pacific stretched endlessly before them, waves rolling in with hypnotic rhythm. Mara's feet hurt with each step, her body protesting, but she ignored it. Pain was temporary. This moment was everything. "I'm sorry I put you on the spot back there," Sullivan finally said. "But when I saw that tattoo, when I recognized the date, I couldn't stay silent." "It's okay, sir." "No, it's not. Your grief is private. Your memorial to your father is personal. I had no right to expose it like that." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "But I need you to understand something. Your father didn't just save my life that day. He changed it." Mara waited, her throat too tight to speak. "April 12, 2007, Sullivan began, his eyes distant with memory. "We were running a joint operation, SEALs and Special Forces working together to clear a Taliban stronghold in Kandahar province. It was supposed to be routine intelligence gathering. It turned into a shitstorm." He picked up a piece of driftwood, turning it over in his hands. "We got ambushed in a dried riverbed. 50, maybe 60 Taliban fighters. They had the high ground and we were caught in a kill zone. I took an AK round to the leg, another to my side. Went down hard. My team was pinned down and I was bleeding out fast." Mara's chest tightened. She'd heard versions of this story before, the heroism of Special Forces soldiers saving their teammates, but she'd never heard it from someone her father had saved. "Captain Cross, your dad, was 50 meters away with his team. They had their own firefight going. He could have stayed there, held position, waited for air support. Nobody would have blamed him." Sullivan's voice grew thick. "Instead, he told his sergeant to take command, grabbed a medic, and ran through crossfire to get to me." "Jesus," Mara whispered. "Bullets everywhere, RPGs, complete chaos. He got to me and the first thing he said was, 'You look like shit, sailor.' Made a joke while people were trying to kill us." Sullivan smiled at the memory. "He and his medic patched me up under fire, tourniquets, pressure bandages, the works. Then he threw me over his shoulder in a fireman's carry and started moving." Sullivan's eyes glistened. 3 kilometers. 3 goddamn kilometers through enemy territory, carrying my ass because I couldn't walk. He was taking fire the whole time, bullets hitting the rocks around us. He never stopped talking, kept me conscious by telling me stories. Stories about what? Mara asked softly. About you. The words hit her like a physical blow. He told me about the time you were 7 and decided to climb the tallest tree in your neighborhood. Got halfway up before you realized you were terrified of heights. But instead of calling for help, you kept climbing until you reached the top, just to prove you could do it. Mara laughed through her tears. I remember that. Mom was furious. He told me about your 8th grade science fair, how you built a working model of a bridge design and won first place. He told me about you getting into Annapolis, how proud he was, how scared he was. Sullivan's voice cracked. He said, my daughter's going to serve, I know it. She's got that look in her eyes, the same look I had at her age, and I'm terrified because I know what this life costs, but I'm also proud because I know she'll be extraordinary. Myra couldn't hold back the sobs anymore. He kept me alive by talking about you for 3 kilometers. By the time we reached the extraction point, I knew your whole life story. I knew your favorite color was blue. I knew you wanted to be a pilot. I knew you played soccer and hated losing. I knew everything. Sullivan stepped closer, his voice gentle. At his memorial, I looked for you. I saw a young woman in a black dress standing with her mother, both of you shattered. I wanted to tell you what your father had done, how he'd saved me. But you were surrounded by people and I didn't have the words. You were there, Mara whispered. Front row. I wore my dress blues. I saluted when they folded the flag. And I made a promise to myself that if I ever met Michael Cross's daughter, I'd tell her the truth about her father. He met her eyes directly. Your father was a hero, not because of medals or commendations, because when faced with an impossible choice, safety or sacrifice, he chose sacrifice. Every single time, that's who he was. Mara wiped her tears with the back of her hand, leaving smudges of salt and sand. The tattoo, she said, her voice steadier now. Everyone here thinks it's some sort of Instagram trend. They mocked me for it, called me Tat, said I was trying to look tough. Sullivan's expression darkened. Who mocked you? It doesn't matter now. He quit during Hell Week. Good, because if he was still here, I'd have some words for him. Sullivan's voice was steel. But that's the thing about truth, it always comes out. Those candidates who laughed at you, they're learning right now that they judged a book by its cover. That tattoo isn't fashion. It's a memorial. It's love made permanent. He touched her shoulder gently. You melted his dog tags into the ink. That's profound. Those tags were around his neck when he died. Yes, sir. The army returned them to my mother. She gave them to me on my 18th birthday, 3 days after his funeral. She said, your father would want you to have these. I kept them for years, but they felt like a weight I couldn't carry. So I found a way to carry him with me forever, literally part of me. Sullivan nodded slowly. He's with you every day, every training session, every obstacle, every moment you want to quit, he's there. That's why I can't quit, Mara said fiercely. Everyone thinks I'm here to honor his memory, but it's more than that. I'm here to finish what he started. He died believing in service, sacrifice, protecting others. I can't let that mean nothing. It doesn't mean nothing, it means everything. Sullivan gestured back toward the base. But I need you to understand something important. You're not your father, you don't have to be. Mara frowned. What do you mean? Your father was an extraordinary soldier. But he was also a man, flawed, human, struggling with his own demons. He carried guilt about being away from you and your mother. He wondered if his service was worth the sacrifice his family made. He wasn't perfect. Sullivan's voice softened. Don't try to become him. Don't let his shadow define you. Honor him by being the best version of yourself, not a copy of him. You understand? Mara nodded, the wisdom sinking in. Also, Sullivan continued, you need to know that your father specifically didn't want you following him into special operations. He told me that during that carry. He said, if Mara joins the military, I hope she picks something safer. Intel, logistics, anything but the sharp end. A laugh burst from Mara's lips. He should have known better. That's exactly what I said. I told him, Captain, if your daughter is anything like you, telling her not to do something is the fastest way to make her do it. Sullivan grinned. He laughed and said, fair point. They started walking again, following the shoreline. Do you think he'd be angry that I'm here? Mara asked quietly. Trying to become a SEAL. Sullivan considered the question carefully. Honestly, he'd be terrified. Every parent worries about their children's safety. But angry? No, he'd be proud beyond words. Because this path you're on, it's brutal, dangerous, and most people fail. But you're still standing. You survived Hell Week. You earned your place here. He stopped and faced her again. The tattoo everyone mocked. It represents the strongest motivation I've ever seen. You're not here for glory or to prove a point about women in combat. You're here because you understand sacrifice at a cellular level. You lost your father to service, and instead of running from it, you ran toward it. That takes courage most people can't comprehend. Sometimes I wonder if I'm crazy, Mara admitted. If this is healthy or just complicated grief. It's probably both, Sullivan said honestly. And that's okay. Grief doesn't follow rules, but let me ask you, when you're in the pool running the O course, suffering through evolutions, what do you feel? Mara thought about it. Purpose, like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, like all the pain and struggle matters. Then you're in the right place, Sullivan smiled. Your father would understand that. He felt the same way about his service. They walked in comfortable silence for a few more minutes before Sullivan spoke again. I have something for you back at my office. He pulled out a phone. Give me your email, I'll send you something tonight. Mara recited her email, curious. What is it? After your father saved me, I wrote him a letter, thanked him for my life, told him what it meant. He never responded, deployed again too quickly, but I kept a copy. You should have it. Tears threatened again, but Mara blinked them back. Thank you, sir, that means everything. One more thing. Sullivan's tone became serious. What happened today, me saluting you, sharing your father's story, it changes the dynamics of your class. Some candidates will respect you more. Others might resent the attention. You need to be prepared for both. I understand. Good, because Bud S isn't over. You've got second phase, third phase, and SQT before you earn that trident. The road ahead is still brutal. I know, sir. But you won't walk it alone anymore. Sullivan extended his hand. If you need anything, advice, support, someone to talk to about your father, you contact me. That's not a courtesy, it's an order. Mara shook his hand, feeling the strength in his grip. Thank you, Commander, for everything. For being there when my father died. For saving his life by letting him save yours. For telling me these stories. It's the least I can do for Michael Cross's daughter. They walked back to the base together. As they approached the grinder, Mara saw her class doing push-ups, some sort of punishment for talking during her absence. Better get back to training, Sullivan said. Show them what cross-determination looks like. Yes, sir. He started to walk away, then turned back. Lieutenant, your father told me one more thing during that carry. He said, if I don't make it home, tell my daughter I love her. Tell her I'm proud of her. Tell her to be brave. Mara's breath caught. I never got the chance to tell you until now. Sullivan's voice was gentle. Your father loved you, he was proud of you, and he wants you to be brave. He saluted one final time, then walked away. Mara stood there, waves crashing behind her, the weight of her father's legacy and love settling on her shoulders like armor. She wasn't just Mara Cross anymore. She was Captain Michael Cross's daughter. And she was going to earn that trident. For him, for herself, for everyone who believed in her. The mockery was over. The real journey had just begun. Word spread through the SEAL training community like wildfire. By evening chow, everyone knew. The female candidate with the tattoo wasn't some wannabe trying to look tough. She was Captain Michael Cross's daughter, the same Captain Cross who'd become a legend in special operations circles. The same man who'd earned a silver star posthumously for his actions in Nangarhar province. Mara felt the shift immediately when she entered the chow hall. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. But this time the stares weren't mocking or dismissive. They were respectful, curious, some even reverent. She hated it. Rodriguez waved her over to a table where Jenkins and Wang sat. Sit with us, we'll run interference. Don't need protection, Mara said, but she sat anyway. Protection, solidarity. Rodriguez pushed a tray toward her. Eat, you need calories after today. She picked at her food, aware of the whispers around her. A group of instructors at a nearby table kept glancing her way. Two candidates from another class approached, wanting to shake her hand, tell her their fathers had served with Captain Cross. It was overwhelming. Okay? Jenkins asked quietly. I just wanted to be a SEAL, Mara said. Not a symbol, not a story, just a SEAL. Too late for that. Wang, normally quiet, spoke up. But maybe it's not a bad thing. My grandfather was Tuskegee Airman, fought in World War II. I grew up with his legacy hanging over me, people expecting me to be as brave as he was. Took me years to realize his legacy wasn't a burden, it was a gift. Mara looked at him, surprised. Wang rarely shared personal information. You figure that out? By accepting that I could honor him without becoming him. I'm not my grandfather, I'm me. But his courage lives in me, influences me, makes me better. Wang shrugged. Your dad's courage lives in you. That's not a burden. That's a superpower. Before Mara could respond, a commotion at the Chow Hall entrance drew everyone's attention. Derek Paulson walked in. He looked terrible, thinner, paler, with dark circles under his eyes. He'd been in the hospital for 3 days recovering from kidney damage and severe hypothermia. Everyone assumed he was done with Bud S, but here he was, wearing training gear. The Chow Hall went silent. Paulson's eyes scanned the room and landed on Mara. For a long moment they stared at each other. She saw something different in his expression: shame, regret, maybe even respect. He walked directly to her table. Rodriguez tensed, ready to intervene. Jenkins and Wang exchanged glances. Mara remained still, watching him approach. Paulson stopped in front of her and came to attention. Lieutenant Cross, may I speak with you outside? Every eye in the Chow Hall was on them. Mara stood slowly. Okay. They walked out to the veranda overlooking the ocean. The sun was setting, painting the sky in oranges and purples. Waves crashed rhythmically against the shore. I heard what happened today, Paulson began, his voice rough. Commander Sullivan, the story about your father. Mara said nothing, waiting. I need to tell you something about myself, something I'm not proud of. He stared at the ocean, unable to meet her eyes. My father is Gunnery Sergeant Martin Paulson, United States Marine Corps, retired, 2 Purple Hearts, Bronze Star with Valor. He's a legitimate war hero. He paused, swallowing hard. Growing up, I was Gunny Paulson's son. Everything I did was compared to him. Football. Your dad was tougher. School. Your dad was smarter. I could never measure up. So I stopped trying to be like him and started trying to be better than everyone else. Louder, stronger, more dominant. Mara began to understand. When I got to Bud S, I thought this was my chance to prove myself, to finally step out of his shadow. Then you showed up with that tattoo and he finally looked at her. I saw my own insecurities reflected back at me, someone else carrying a father's legacy, someone else dealing with that weight, and instead of recognizing a kindred spirit, I attacked you for it, Mara asked quietly. Because if you could carry your father's legacy with dignity and grace, while I was just an angry kid trying to prove something. What did that say about me? Tears welled in his eyes. I mocked you because I was terrified of my own inadequacy. I called you Tat because I didn't want anyone looking too closely at what that tattoo actually meant. Because if they did, they'd see you were here for real reasons and I was just here running from my father's shadow. He wiped his eyes roughly. I called my dad from the hospital, told him I'd quit. You know what he said? He said, good. You weren't there for the right reasons anyway. That broke me. My father saw through everything, all my bravado, all my bullshit. He knew I was there trying to compete with him, not serve something bigger. What are you doing back here then? Mara asked. I told the doctors I needed to return. I told my medical review board I was healthy enough. I lied, begged, and pulled every string I could. Paulson's voice was fierce now. Because I realized something in that hospital bed. I don't want to quit. Not because of my father's legacy, not to prove anything. But because I genuinely want to be a SEAL. I want to serve. And I can't do that if I'm filled with resentment and insecurity. He met her eyes directly. I'm asking for your forgiveness. Not because I deserve it, but because I need to start making things right. What I did to you, the mockery, the cruelty, the harassment, it was unforgivable. I made your training harder than it needed to be. I tried to break you because I was already broken. Mara studied him for a long moment. This wasn't the arrogant bully from first phase. This was someone who'd been shattered and was trying to rebuild himself into something better. You hurt me, she said honestly. Not physically, but you made every day harder. You made me question whether I belonged here. You weaponized my grief. I know, I'm so sorry. But Mara continued. Hell Week taught me something. It strips away all the bullshit and shows you who people really are. You quit. You hit your breaking point and rang the bell. That took courage too, recognizing your limits. I shouldn't have quit. Maybe you needed to. Maybe you needed to break completely before you could rebuild properly. She extended her hand. You want to earn back respect. Stop talking and start proving it. Actions matter more than apologies here. Paulson shook her hand gratefully, being rolled back to the next class. Starting Hell Week over from the beginning, medical orders. He smiled grimly. But when I get through, and I will get through, maybe we'll serve together one day. Maybe, Mara agreed. They stood there in comfortable silence, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Can I ask you something? Paulson said. When I was mocking you, calling you Tat, making those jokes, did you ever think about quitting? Mara considered lying, then decided on truth. Every single day. What stopped you? She touched her shoulder unconsciously, feeling the tattoo beneath her shirt. My father didn't quit when bullets were flying. He didn't quit when he was carrying a wounded SEAL through enemy territory. He didn't quit when facing death. How could I quit because someone called me names? Paulson nodded slowly. Your father would be proud of you. Commander Sullivan said the same thing. He's right. Paulson straightened. I should let you get back to chow, but thank you for listening, for not spitting in my face, for giving me a chance to apologize. All carry something, Paulson. Your father's legacy isn't a burden, it's a challenge. Rise to it. He nodded and walked away, his posture somehow straighter than before. Rodriguez appeared beside Mara carrying 2 cups of coffee. That looked intense. Apologized, really apologized. You believe him? I think he believes himself. Whether he follows through, Mara shrugged. Time will tell. You're more forgiving than I'd be. Not forgiving him for me. I'm forgiving him for me, carrying anger and resentment. That's extra weight I don't need during training. She took the coffee gratefully. Besides, everyone deserves a chance at redemption. Rodriguez clinked his coffee cup against hers. Wise words, Cross. Your dad teach you that. My mom, actually. After he died, she could have been bitter. Instead, she chose grace. She honored his memory by living well, not by drowning in grief. Smart woman. The smartest. They drank their coffee and watched darkness fall over the Pacific. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, pool competency training, which had a reputation for breaking candidates who'd survived Hell Week. Second phase was where the mind games intensified, where instructors actively tried to drown you to test your composure. But tonight, Mara felt something she hadn't felt since arriving at Bud S. Peace. Her father's story was known now. The mockery had ended. Paulson had apologized. Commander Sullivan had given her closure about her father's final years. He wasn't alone anymore. Rodriguez, she said quietly. You, for being decent from the start, for not joining in when others mocked me, for being a good swim partner. He bumped her shoulder. We're teammates, Cross. That's what teammates do. We've got each other's backs, especially when things get hard. Things are going to get harder, I know, but we'll face it together. They finished their coffee and headed back to the barracks. Tomorrow would test them in new ways, but tonight they'd earned a moment of peace. And in the darkness, Mara felt her father's presence, not as a burden or expectation, but as a comforting hand on her shoulder, guiding her forward. She was ready for whatever came next. Second phase was drowning. That's what it felt like anyway. Pool competency training meant spending hours underwater while instructors actively sabotaged your equipment, turning off your air, tying your hoses in knots, ripping your mask off. All while you had to remain calm, solve the problems, and prove you wouldn't panic. Mara was terrible at it initially. Her first pool comp session ended with her surfacing early, gasping and coughing, failure written across the instructor's face. 3 other candidates had also failed. They had to repeat the evolution that afternoon. Overthinking it, Rodriguez told her during the lunch break. They sat on the pool deck studying the dive equipment. When they tear your mask off, your instinct is to panic. Fight that instinct, accept the chaos. Easy for you to say, you passed, barely. He demonstrated the technique for clearing a flooded mask. The trick is treating it like a game. The instructors are trying to make you panic. Don't give them the satisfaction. That afternoon, Mara went under again. An instructor immediately ripped her mask off, turned her air off, and tied her backup regulator in knots. Underwater, blind, unable to breathe, she felt panic clawing at her throat. Then she heard her father's voice, a memory from childhood when she'd fallen in a pool and panicked. Stop thrashing. Think, solve the problem. Mara stopped fighting. She methodically worked through the problems, found her backup regulator, untied the knot, got air flowing, retrieved her mask, cleared it, equalized. All while her lungs screamed for oxygen. When she completed the task and gave the instructor the OK sign, she saw grudging approval in his eyes. She passed. The class dynamic had shifted completely after Commander Sullivan's visit. Candidates who'd been neutral now actively supported Mara. They'd pace her during runs, spot her during obstacle courses, share extra food when she needed calories. But the most surprising change was Jenkins. The big man from Ohio had been quiet during first phase, never participating in Paulson's mockery but never stopping it either. Now he appointed himself Mara's unofficial guardian. You got a problem. He'd growl at anyone who looked at her sideways. During combat conditioning, when candidates were expected to fight aggressively, Jenkins made sure no one took cheap shots at Mara. Why are you doing this? She asked him one evening. Jenkins was quiet for a moment, cleaning his rifle. I got 2 daughters, 8 and 10 years